One evening, Madame Bottom Pot's neighbor knocked on her door to borrow some salt. Finding the door unlocked, she pushed it open and stepped inside. Her heart froze. In the dimly lit room, 9 naked men, including Madame Bottom Pot's husband, surrounded little Aisha. The child sat on the floor, her face streaked with tears. The neighbor gasped in horror, realizing what was happening. The men were taking turns violating the helpless child. The village gossiped about Madame Bottom Pot. Her wealth and influence had grown over the years. She was one of the richest women around, known for her popular bar. It was always full of laughter and the clinking of glasses. Wealthy men in sleek cars flocked to her establishment. Madame Bottom Pot was more than just a businesswoman. She was an enigma. She knew how to entertain her customers, and they rewarded her with big tips and gifts. But no one knew what truly went on behind the doors of her bar. The laughter, money, and smiles hid a well-kept secret. She had a special arrangement with her loyal customers. Wealthy men, some married, some single, but all discreet. In her private rooms, Madame Bottom Pot offered them something unique: the company of young, beautiful women who worked at her bar. These women, her special staff, were part of a secret business. They were carefully chosen and trained not only to serve drinks, but also to entertain her clients in ways they didn't discuss openly. To protect her secret, Madame Bottom Pot was very careful about who she hired. Any young woman wanting to work for her had to swear an oath of silence, promising never to reveal the true nature of their work. This vow was a binding promise, a contract that protected Madame Bottom Pot's reputation and her business. As long as the secret stayed hidden, her riches would grow. But eventually, something unexpected happened. Fewer customers came to her bar. At first, Madame Bottom Pot didn't worry. Maybe it was just a temporary lull, she thought. But the drop in business continued. She could no longer ignore the empty tables and quiet rooms. Disturbed, Madame Bottom Pot decided to take action. She contacted her regular clients, calling them one by one, trying to find out why they weren't coming anymore. After many polite but evasive answers, one of her oldest clients, Chief Okoro, finally told her the truth. "Madame Bottom Pot," he said, "we need something new. Your girls are lovely, but they aren't as fresh as they used to be. We need younger faces." His words hit Madame Bottom Pot hard. She realized that her girls, who had been with her for years, were showing the effects of their long hours and difficult work. Many looked tired and drained. They had given their youth and energy to her business, and in doing so, had lost some of the appeal that had drawn men to her bar in the first place. Now, Madame Bottom Pot knew what she had to do. She had to bring in fresh faces, young women who would revitalize her bar and bring back the customers. To revitalize her business, Madame Bottom Pot started looking for new employees. She used her connection, sent messages through town criers, and put up posters around the village. The posters advertised Madame Bottom Pot is hiring and promised good pay and excellent benefits for young women interested in working at her bar. The job opening, despite its attractive pay, wasn't as appealing as many had hoped. Whispers about Madame Bottom Pot's establishment had spread through the village, and the weary expressions of her employees only fueled the hesitation of potential applicants. Days turned into weeks, and only a handful of young women dared to apply. But none met Madame Bottom Pot's exacting standards. They were either too cautious or burdened by responsibilities that could interfere with their loyalty. What she needed was someone fresh, desperate, and in need of the kind of money only she could offer. Just as Madame Bottom Pot was beginning to lose hope, Rume stepped forward. Rume was barely out of her teens, a quiet girl who had been living with her sick mother, Madame Bottom Pot's younger sister. Though Madame Bottom Pot and her sister were family, their relationship had been strained for years. When her sister fell sick and became confined to a wheelchair, Madame Bottom Pot distanced herself, refusing to be burdened by her struggles. She had wealth, success, and a business to run. She didn't see why she should concern herself with her sister's misfortunes. At first, she had no interest in taking Rume under her wing. But when she saw her, young, innocent, and desperate, she realized Rume would be perfect for business. So, feigning concern, she finally called her niece. "Come and see me, Rume. Let me help you." For Rume, struggling to care for her mother, this was a lifeline. She had heard unsettling rumors about Auntie's business, but the promise of a steady income was too tempting to ignore. If this job meant she could afford food, medication, and a more comfortable life for her mother, then she had no choice. On the day she arrived for the interview, Rume couldn't help but notice the tired expressions of the other workers. Their eyes were hollow, their smiles forced. Something about them seemed heavy, as if they carried a burden that was invisible to the outside world. Curious, she approached one of the girls and asked in a hushed voice, "Why does everyone look so sad here?" The girl, glancing around nervously, whispered, "It's just the work. It takes a toll." Before Rume could ask more, Madame Bottom Pot appeared, her sharp gaze sweeping over her new recruit. "Ah, my dear Rume," she said, spreading her arms warmly. "You have grown into a fine young woman. You are lucky I am here to help you." Though the warmth in her voice felt rehearsed, Rume was too desperate to question it. After a brief conversation, Madame Bottom Pot presented her with a contract and an oath of silence. "Sign this, my dear," Madame Bottom Pot said sweetly. "It's just to make sure you understand our rules." Desperate for money, Rume signed the document without hesitation, unknowingly sealing her fate as Madame Bottom Pot's newest recruit. At first, the job seemed manageable. Madame Bottom Pot was unexpectedly generous, offering small bonuses and extra tips to make Rume feel welcome. The kindness put her at ease, and she began to believe that this might finally be the opportunity she had been praying for. Determined to prove herself, Rume worked really hard, wanting to be the best. She put in extra effort, memorizing everything quickly and ensuring she was always the first to respond when Madame Bottom Pot called. Her dedication did not go unnoticed. "Ah, Rume, my golden girl!" Madame Bottom Pot would hail, watching her with approval. "You are smart, hardworking, and obedient. This is how to make money in this life. How are you enjoying the job?" She would ask about Rume's welfare, sometimes slipping her extra bonuses and telling her, "You will go far in this business, my dear." The praise and attention made Rume feel accomplished, and she pushed herself even harder, eager to win more favor. Each night, when she got home, she would sit by her mother, excitedly recounting the day's events. "Mama, you should see how Auntie was praising me today. She gave me extra money again," she would say with excitement. Her mother, seated quietly in her wheelchair, would listen with a soft smile, nodding at times but saying little. Some nights she would fall asleep mid-conversation, her frail body too tired to keep up with her daughter's endless tales. Rume would cover her with a wrapper, sighing as she watched her sleep, determined to keep working hard to provide a better life for both of them. But as the days passed, Madame Bottom Pot's true intentions began to reveal themselves. As Rume was about leaving for the day, exhausted but relieved that she could finally go home to her mother, her aunt, Madame Bottom Pot, suddenly called her back. "Rume, My dear, you'll be staying for an extra shift tonight, she announced, her voice firm but laced with deceptive warmth. Our biggest client is coming, and I want you to attend to them. If you serve them well, you'll get good tips. You want extra money for your mother, don't you? Service them? The words echoed in Rume's mind, making her uneasy. Something about the way Madame Bottom Pot said it sent a strange feeling creeping up her spine. But Auntie, my mother, Rume hesitated, worry flashing in her eyes. She is expecting me. There's no one to care for her. She'll be worried if I don't come home. Madame Bottom Pot waved a dismissive hand, her painted lips curving into a reassuring smile. Oh, don't worry, my dear. I'll send a messenger across to her. She will know you are safe and working hard. She will understand. The way she said it sounded final, leaving Rume with no room for argument. She swallowed her unease, forcing herself to nod. If this extra shift meant more money, maybe it was worth it. Maybe Auntie was right. She took a deep breath, trying to shake off the strange feeling settling in her chest. Madame Bottom Pot patted her back, a sly grin on her face. Good girl. Now, go freshen up. The client will be here soon. And just like that, Rume's fate was sealed. The night came and the bar was alive with energy. Wealthy men dressed in fine kaftans and suits came in and out, laughing, drinking, and tossing wads of cash like it was nothing. The workers had been given new outfits for the night, each more revealing than the last. Rume hesitated as she held up hers, a tight, short red dress that clung to her body in ways that made her uncomfortable. She wanted to protest, but the look on Madame Bottom Pot's face silenced her. Auntie wouldn't take no for an answer. The music blared through the speakers, drowning out her unease. As she walked through the room, adjusting the hem of her dress nervously, she felt eyes on her. Men watched her, some whispering to each other, their gazes making her skin crawl. Madame Bottom Pot approached her with a knowing smile, placing a firm hand on her shoulder. Rume, go and attend to Chief Okoro. He's my biggest customer. Please, smile as you serve him. Let him feel special. You know, if you make him happy, he rewards generously. Nodding reluctantly, Rume walked to where Chief Okoro sat, a pot-bellied man in a starched white agbada, gold rings adorning his fingers. His eyes lingered on her body, his lips curling into an approving smirk. Ah, fine girl. You look good tonight. Very good, he said, his voice deep and laced with admiration. Thank you, sir, Rume muttered, lowering her gaze as she placed his drink in front of him. She wanted to turn away quickly, but Madame Bottom Pot leaned in and whispered into her ear, her breath hot against her skin. Go and attend to him properly. She turned her head slightly and saw where her aunt was pointing, the inner chamber. Her heart began to race. No, this wasn't right. But before she could say anything, Chief Okoro stood, taking her hand in his grip firm. Come, let's talk inside, my dear, he said, leading her towards the dimly lit room. With every step she took, Rume's legs felt weaker. She wanted to run, but fear held her in place. The door shut behind her with a soft click, sealing her inside. She turned and froze. Chief Okoro was already on the bed, his agbada discarded, his large belly rising and falling as he spread his arms like a hungry lion ready to devour its prey. Sir, what do you want? She stammered, her voice shaky. A slow, eerie smile spread across his lips. Call me Sugar Boy, he said, licking his lips. Her stomach turned. Sir, please. I don't know what you want, she said, inching backward toward the door. But before she could turn, he lunged at her, grabbing her wrist in a tight grip. Where do you think you're going? You don't want to make me happy, he sneered. Terror filled Rume's eyes as she struggled, but he was too strong. He threw her onto the bed and forced himself on her, again and again, his heavy body crushing her cries into silence. She tried to fight. She tried to scream, but her strength faded with each passing second, her mind shutting down from the pain, the horror. And then, everything went black. She lay there motionless. Chief Okoro, breathing heavily, realized what he had done. Panic flashed in his eyes. He stumbled off the bed, hurriedly pulling on his clothes. Without a second glance at Rume's lifeless form, he slipped out of the bar of these, disappearing into the night. The next morning, the sun had barely risen when the cleaner, Mama Philo, entered the inner chamber to tidy up. She hummed softly, dragging her mop behind her, but as she approached the bed, she froze. Her heart pounded as her eyes took in the horrifying sight before her. Rume's lifeless body lay sprawled on the bed, her dress torn, blood pooling beneath her. Her face was blank, eyes staring at nothing. A scream threatened to escape her lips, but she slapped a hand over her mouth. Panic gripped her. She stumbled back, nearly knocking over a chair, then turned and ran straight to Madame Bottompot's office. "Madam! Madam!" She burst in, breathless, her hands shaking. "Come quick! Something terrible has happened!" Madame Bottompot's face darkened as she followed the cleaner into the room. The moment she saw Rume's body, her lips pressed into a thin line, but she wasn't shocked. She wasn't even sad. Her eyes burned with pure rage, but not because her sister's daughter was dead. She was angry that Rume had dared to die in her establishment. "Useless girl," she hissed under her breath. The other workers had gathered by the doorway, peeking in, their faces pale with fear. Madame Bottompot turned to them sharply, her voice cold and cutting. "She has a bad spirit. How many days into this business? And she brought this upon herself. She wants to ruin everything I built? I won't let that happen." The girls shivered, exchanging frightened glances. They knew what was coming next. Madame Bottompot's eyes narrowed dangerously. "Listen carefully, all of you. I don't want anyone to know about this. Everything stays here. You hear me? If anyone asks about her, you say you don't know her. She never worked here. Am I clear?" The girls nodded quickly, terrified. "Now, bury her, quietly, and do it fast," she snapped. Mama Philo hesitated. "But madam..." "Shut up and do as I say," Madame Bottompot barked, her nostrils flaring. No one dared to argue. Under the cover of dawn, Rume's body was carried out and buried in an unmarked grave behind the bar. No prayers, no last words, just silence. Later that afternoon, Madame Bottompot's phone rang. It was Chief Okoro. "Madam, you know how to handle this, Abby." His voice was casual, as if he hadn't just killed someone. She didn't hesitate. "Of course, Chief, don't worry about a thing," she purred. Moments later, her account balance beeped. A huge sum of money had been deposited, a dirty price to silence the truth. She smirked, leaning back in her chair. But deep inside, a strange feeling crept up her spine. What if this wasn't the end? To be continued. What happens next? Will Rume's spirit seek revenge? Will Madame Bottompot's secrets finally come to light? Subscribe and wait for part 2. You don't want to miss what happens next.